Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, there's obviously not much need for me to talk about the other bills other than Bill 17, as most of the members, apart from one or two, have actually spoken about the other bills that are all consequential to the budget announcement that was made. Mr. Speaker, sir, I'd like to thank those members who spoke in favour of the consequential bills. Mr. Speaker, just very quickly the Honourable Prime Minister has actually addressed many of the issues that I wanted to talk about, but just very quickly in respect of what some of the opposition members had said. And I'd also like to thank Honourable Bulitavu, Honourable Siraratu, who actually brought home the point about the practical issue and the practicality of why these amendments actually have been brought about and how indeed it will make Itauke land very valuable. And I think there needs to be a holistic approach to understanding how the value of the land will improve. But before that, Honourable Kepa gave this very sanitized view of Fijian history. And, she, as the Honourable Prime Minister highlighted, she opened up by addressing to all the chiefs in Fiji. Why did she have to do that now? She hasn't done it before. She's only done it to raise emotions, to sensationalize the issue, as somehow this bill is a threat to indigenous culture, indigenous land. And this is precisely the reason why she's done that. And that's what I call the politicization or the commodification of culture. Culture is being used by elites to suit their own political agenda. And that's what's happened. That's precisely what the Honourable Prime Minister was saying. And that's precisely what has happened actually today on the floor of Parliament. Mr. Speaker, so she gave the historical lesson about Fiji, but she failed to miss many of the points. She's failed to talk about tribal wars. She failed to talk about Tonga. She failed to talk about how land was alienated by some chiefs by giving it away. Suva is freehold today because Ratu Seru Dakambao gave away the land to the Americans as compensation for the burning of the ship. Other chiefs, unfortunately, were duped into giving away land that was converted to freehold land for mere musket or a few other things. The deed of cession was signed only by one chief from the Western Division, the Kalevu. In turn, gave away land, converted Itauke land to freehold land. People from Ra who objected to colonial rule were exiled to Kandavu, Honorable Rasova. You should know that part of the history. People in Zolo, there were 70 people who were killed because they objected to colonial rule. There was measles that killed about 25 to 40,000 Itauke people. Indentured slaves were brought from British India. There was about complaints about land allocation. Through the Native Lands Commission. Yes, Ratusukuna did go around, but if you go to the western side in particular, many people will still complain to you about how some of the lands have been allocated to individual land-owning units. And of course, we had 999-year leases given on Vatukola. The land before the Vatukola gold mine still has 999-year leases. I did the research. You go, there's a couple from New Zealand that was giving 999-year leases on Itauke land that was alienated for 999 years. And of course, we then had the alienation of land in Denara and Momi, and no amount of justification. On one hand, you have the opposition talking about, we should not alienate Itauke land, yet Honorable Tikon Duandua, Rambuka outside of Parliament, and other people within Parliament have tried to justify that. The Bainimarama government and the Fiji First government and our Prime Minister have never justified the permanent alienation of land for economic development. The philosophy is that you can have economic development even with Itauke land title intact. And that's the philosophy we're trying to follow. And the way to ensure that we have that philosophy is that you make Itauke land attractive for investment purposes. Mr. Speaker, so just very quickly, the point that I'd also like to make, and people forget, because there's a very dichotomous approach to land issues in Fiji, is that they think that all the lessees will always be, as history has pointed out, only Indo-Fijians or people of other ethnic groups, and the lessors will be all Itauke people. Demographics have changed. A lot of Itauke people are also lessees. They are also tenants. You go to Tadirua, the residential subdivision, all those people are living as lessees on Itauke land, who are Itauke people. People who want to get into development. Honorable Gavoka said, we don't want banks. He comes from the tourism sector. He worked for the Fijian Hotel. He worked for on Tokariki Island. All of those resorts, the reasons why they've been able to make tens and millions of dollars of worth of investment in those resorts is because they've been able to get a mortgage on that land, access the funds, and then build up the land. What does it do for the Itauke land? It improves the value of the land. So when the value of the land goes up, other unleased lands around that land, the value of it goes up also. People want to pay more money. They've got security of tenure. They've got a lease that they can actually readily use, go to the bank. It improves the value of the land for the landowners. It's nonsense to say all the Itauke land is leased is mortgaged. Absolute nonsense. Most agricultural leases, sugarcane leases, they don't have a mortgage because banks don't want to touch them. They're only for 30 years. Commercial banks don't want to touch 30-year leases. They're more interested in leasing giving loans on lands that have 99-year leases, like the tourism sector, like residential, commercial, industrial. All the lands, for example, in Nandi, Singatoka, Latoka, places like Tavua, in Lambasa, all those lands, Nosuri, they're all Itauke lands. Those towns and municipalities are built on that. There are mortgages there. Are we trying to say that the landowners from, for example, in Singatoka or Nandi who own the land, they know exactly what B and Patel and Sons, which mortgagee they have? They don't know that because they're not told that, because they're not part of the process. So this is how ridiculous this objection is. Unfortunately, it would appear that Honorable Tambuya, in her quest to get popularity, suddenly went out and did this TikTok messaging, stood in front of Ratu Sukuna, which I think is an insult to spread misinformation, in front of his statue, did this TikTok, and Sodelpa grabbed hold of it. As the Honorable Prime Minister said, they had nothing to respond on the budget, and now they've gone along with it. Today, she did not speak, because she's on very soft ground. Yet, unfortunately, Honorable Gavoka, the leader of opposition, and everybody else just went along with it. Absolutely soft ground. They quote Richard Naidu and Graham Leong. Let me tell you, I've heard so much about this. None of them have said there's anything wrong with the amendment itself. 2 points I'd like to make about these two gentlemen. Richard Naidu, the last conversation I had with him was in about 2008 at the Holiday Inn. I remember exactly when we were actually reforming the telecommunications sector in Fiji. He was acting very unprofessionally. He was representing Cable and Wireless, or Fintel at that point in time. And I asked him, I said, can you please be a bit more professional, and your staff should be professional? The first thing he said to me, he said, what about government work? What about government work? Because Monroe Lees used to get all the government work. They used to get all the legal work from EFL or FEA in those days, Fiji Sugar Corporation, Air Pacific Limited. If you look at the hourly rates they used to charge, sometimes to work out to be about $900 an hour. Suddenly that monopoly of theirs was gone. Graham Leong, Howard's, same thing. After 2007, we appeared at Law Asia conferences. In one conference specifically, that's the last engagement I had with him, he stood up and complained about the government, then in the same breath complained about how they're no longer getting any work. Howard's, for which he worked for, or was a partner, used to get almost exclusively all the TLTB work.
There's a point of order.
That's where they're coming from.
There's a point of order.
Honourable Speaker,
A point of order. You have the floor.
Mr. Richard Naidu is not here to defend, can't defend himself. Honourable Speaker is not here. So can we not bring his name up, please? Stick to the bill, please, Honourable Speaker.
Honourable member, you quoted the very person we're talking about. So, Honourable Attorney General, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I found it rather interesting that Honorable Kepa said, oh, we got elected and then we came into Parliament and there was this constitution next to us on the seat. Well, for you to contest in the elections, you would have had to contest in the elections. There was already stated in the very constitution.
I agree.
The constitution was in place.
They've lost them.
What a preposterous proposition.
Enough.
It made it ridiculous. It makes her look ridiculous, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, that, again, she said the land's been taken away. Nothing's been taken away, Mr. Speaker, sir. Honorable Lavere went behind that. I do not see how that is relevant. They appeal for calm. Honorable Kepa appealed for calm. Honorable Gavoka appealed for calm. But who actually said that there was no calm? Who created this? Who created this drama?
Exactly.
They are the ones who did it, and now they want to come across as saviors and say, don't create problems, be calm. You are the ones who created it in the first place. If you objectively looked at the law, if you objectively thought about the implications, the ramifications of it, you would realize it is simply an administrative matter that in the long run makes people want to come and lease Itauke land. Mr. Speaker, sir, they've said, oh, everything was hunky-dory before the Honorable Prime Minister came along, before the Beni Marama came along, the 2013 Constitution, before Fiji First came along. What a lot of nonsense. No government has, for example, done Itauke land development. We are carrying, there's about 4 or 5 ready lots to be sold now in different locations. Saweni, Warambitia, Yandua, in Vunda. One of the ones that we're going to be developing, Mr. Speaker, is 2 lots actually in the Western Division. They seem to be a lot more attuned to getting the land sort of developed under this particular program. One of them is a former rugby player. He is a member of the landowning unit, but who's gone and leased the land himself. And he's now come to us and said, I've got the lease. Can you please develop the land for me? And actually it's prime land. And we are developing it for him. So this gentleman will, in about 18 months, a year or so, he will actually become a millionaire. Similarly, another person down the road from him is doing exactly the same thing. We are empowering Itauke landowners so they benefit directly from the land. Let's get away from moving away and saying, oh, you know, cash poor. Let's make them cash rich so that as true landlords, they'll be able to get the benefit of it. Mr. Speaker, sir, the other point I'd like to make, Honorable, Prasad went on about, that we are giving racial overtones, but he does not have what I call the gumption to stand up to Sodelpa's racism. Does not have the gumption. He'll only have a go at the Honorable Prime Minister, only have a go at Fiji First. That's all he's good at. Despite the racial overtones by Sodelpa, he'll only criticize the PM. He'll only criticize Fiji First. But he cannot stand up to Sodelpa because, you see, all of these people have a political agenda. And their political agenda is, how can we get more votes? How can we get more votes? Where's this little bank vote that we're going to get? This bank over here we can get votes from. That's all they're concerned about. It's precisely what they're concerned about. Honorable Gerengere Tambua said it's an election budget. We did not even think of elections.
Yeah. Tell them.
Here they're talking about the elections. So does that mean, as I said earlier on, helping market vendors, the fishers, the minibus drivers, the taxi drivers, security guards, assisting them means it's an election budget? Of course not. We talk about the scenario, the situation our people are going through. We need to assist them, election or no election. Mr. Speaker, sir, I think the other point that I like to make was that, I forgot to make the point about the fact that one of the lots of land that we are developing, and we're hoping that the Honourable Prime Minister very soon do the opening of that subdivision. We have an amazing situation. We've developed this land. With the land, we've now independently valued that land, where the land for 2 acres of Itauke land, which has been developed, is valued in excess of about $700,000. $700,000. Yet, another piece of land down the road, very close to it, TLTB has leased that land, 5 acres, for $500,000, if not less. You see the discrepancy? You see the discrepancy? This is precisely what we are talking about. There are some people who, because they may have access to certain members of the landowning unit, they go, they give them some short-term benefits. They agree, 60% signs, and they go and lease the land. And a lot of these people some of them have deep pockets. And here we are doing it properly. We're getting land valuation for far smaller size land. We are now getting a higher price for that land. We don't want that. We don't want that. They're asking me, oh, why are you doing this, AG? We want the landowners to do well, because overall, economically, if they do well, they feel good to lease out their land, even for agricultural purposes for a long period of time. They get market rate. Economically, everybody will do well. More jobs, more development, more construction. They'll become rich. They'll become prosperous. Other people will also become wealthy and prosperous too. It's critically important for us to be able to draw the nexus between security of tenure and also economic growth. Honorable, I think one of the members also mentioned about the entrenched legislation. I think Honorable Gavoka went about entrenched legislation. What a superfluous argument. Notwithstanding entrenched legislation, so-called entrenched legislation, Rambuka alienated Itauke land permanently in Denarau. The Garasa government, Honorable Lalam Balavu, was the Minister for Lands, permanently alienated land in Momi. Yes, the law allowed for it. He said in Parliament before, I did everything legally. Yes, you say you did everything legally, but what's happened to the philosophy that we hold Itauke land as communal ownership? It's intergenerational. So why permanently alienate it? Which one do you want? We believe that we can have communally owned land, don't permanently alienate it, but still have economic growth, still put the value. So when foreigners come to Fiji, they don't come running to the government and say, hey, convert the Itauke land, so then we'll get a better price for it, then we can invest. No, we want to tell them, look, Itauke land is just as good as any other land tenure. You invest in that. That's what we want. That's how the value of Itauke land will go up. So please, don't do this for political reasons. I mean, Honorable Prime Minister is absolutely right. I mean, I was quite shocked that Honorable Saukuru was reading out the names of only the Fijian rugby players from the Western Division. I'm from the Western Division, but the Fijian team is a team made up of players from everywhere. Why are we doing this
selective?
Why are we dividing people along provincial lines about east and west and north and south? This is precisely this kind of philosophy that leads to this type of fragmentation. And we know that. If you're truly honest, we know that. And we see that today when certain members of parliament from the opposition will only talk about the province they come from. They don't care about the other province. They only talk about their province. Oh, build a bridge there. Or do this over here. Nobody from Fiji first. Even Honorable Seruratu is from Tailevu. The PM is from Tailevu. They never say, oh, do this for Tailevu. Honorable Nengamu does not say, do this for the Ba province or Nanranga province. Honorable Usamate does not say, do stuff about Lau or Kandavu. Nobody does. Honorable Vuniwanga does not say, oh, this do stuff about Dakandrove.
They've lost the plot.
Honorable Bala does not say, do only thing about Ba. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, the point is that the opposition thinks in a very fragmented manner. They did not acknowledge the fact that royalties today are being paid before royalties being even paid from mineral extraction to the landowners. They're getting 80% of that. Mr. Speaker, sir, just very quickly before I finish off, Mr. Speaker, sir, you know, they talked about, you know, we are doing this with respect and, you know, etc. But Mr. Speaker, sir, and, you know, doing with all due propriety, what about their own internal party politics? Look at the amount of treachery that's going on within their own party, the backbiting, the disrespect to shown each other, the leaking of your caucus meetings to us. Some of you do that to us, send it to us, to the media. That's the true Sodelpa. Please, don't try and put up this front. The reality is that you are simply clutching at straws. You have your own political party members going and signing people for other political parties to be registered. Some of you know who you are.
Shame.
Let's talk about that. Mr. Speaker, sir, the reality of the matter is that this bill does not in any way derogate, water down, limit the rights of the Itauke landowners. Mr. Speaker, sir, what it does is actually remove an administrative blockage for which, as the Honorable Prime Minister highlighted, and nobody picked up this point. Up till today, the law still has not changed. When somebody, for example, applied to TLTB management for a change in their mortgagee, they don't go running off to the landowning unit and say, hey, by the way, you know this land you leased 30 years ago? They've now changed in banks from BSP to Bread Bank. They don't do that. TLTB just simply does it because it's an administrative matter. That's all that happens. The landowner's rights is not affected. That's what we are legally removing. For those people who say, oh, maybe they should have put a period and, within that period, if they don't respond, therefore it's okay. But why have that administrative blockage there in the first place? Because it creates bureaucracy, whether it's done in 7 days or 14 days. And it does not in any way affect the existing rights of the landowners, but fundamentally improves the value of their land. And Mr. Speaker, sir, how can we argue against that? Unless, of course, you have a political agenda, which what the opposition does, Mr. Speaker, sir, and is unfortunately that we have spent so much time on it to be able to argue about these bills. Mr. Speaker, sir, I'll end there now. And I'd like to thank all the members for their contribution, in particular those who contributed positively. Thank you very much.